Hello everybody, welcome back to Story Time. Today's story starts out a long time ago. There were 4 guys from Jacksonville, Florida who liked to break stuff. And they decided to form a band. It was a new metal type band. And when all the haters came out of the woodworks, they let them know they did it all for the nookie. And when the world started to crash down on them, they didn't fold like a Limp Bizkit. They just got together and kept on rolling.
Alright, partner. Keep on rolling, baby.
So it's a tale as old as time. How many artists or bands do we know in the history of music that have came out of nowhere, exploded, took the world by storm, only to fade out and just fall from the top? Well, does Limp Bizkit fall in that category? Well, we'll explore their journey, and in this video, we together will decide where exactly is Limp Bizkit's place in music history. Let's start this thing out with Fred Durst, the man, working as a tattoo artist in Florida. Now, his music interest was very vast. It went from hip-hop to metal, everything in between. Now, I'm not saying it was his idea or he created it, but he definitely had an idea, and it was take elements from hip-hop, from rock, put them together to create one unique sound. So Durst was in 3 bands in the early 90s. One of those bands had a man on bass by the name of Sam Rivers. So Sam Rivers and Fred decided to start their own band, and they did. And Sam recommended his cousin, John Otto, to come in on drums, so they brought him in. So after fiddling around with a few guitarists, they eventually brought in Wes Borland to be their permanent man on guitar. Now, I forgot to mention earlier, can you guess what they settled on as a name for a band? Go ahead, I'll give you a few seconds. That's right, you guessed it. Limp Bizkit. Man, you guys are good. So you know how this story goes. The guys were starting to make a name for themselves in their scene. Their scene was the Jacksonville underground scene. They were playing the local clubs, catching momentum. People were starting to like them. They were developing that fan base. Though small, it was starting to develop. That's always the key. Doesn't matter how small it is when it starts. At least it's there. But Fred was still doing tattoos, and the fact that he was still doing tattoos was about to help him catch a big break. So coming through town was the classic hardcore punk band Sick of It All. They had the band Korn opening for them. Now Korn was on the rise themselves. They were starting to develop momentum in their own right. But after the show, the guys from Limp Bizkit and Fred approached them and said, hey, let's go have some beers and hang out. I'll do some tattoos. So the guys started hanging out, and Fred threw on the demo of Limp Bizkit. Now, Fieldy, the bassist from Korn, loved it. As a matter of fact, he said later that that demo was 10 times better than any tattoos that Fred was doing at the time. And they offered the guys Limp Bizkit a chance to come out on tour with them. So they did, but they were still an unsigned band. So the guys from Limp Bizkit were out in Hollywood opening up for Korn. It was after the show a guy approached them, worked for a very small independent record label called Flip Records. Now, he wanted to sign the band, and he was offering $50,000 to bring them on. There was another label that wanted to sign Limp Bizkit as well, and they were a little bit bigger of a label. Now, Fred ended up saying something along the lines to this guy that worked for Flip Records that, hey, I'll sign that contract the day that our tour bus rolls over and flips. Don't know exactly how long after that conversation it happened, but they ended up getting into an accident on their tour bus, and the damn thing rolled a couple times. Now, they went back to Flip Records and ended up signing with them, but it wasn't for the initial $50,000. It was 3 times more than that. It ended up being $175,000 that the guys got to sign with Flip Records. So Limp Bizkit's first album, $3 Bill, y'all, was a good album. It got radio play, and the main thing that helped them grow was they consistently were touring. Any chance they got to go out and tour, wherever it was, whatever it was, they did it. So you gotta respect the effort there. So the guys really put themselves in a position to win. But it was their second studio album, released in 1999. Significant Other. That was a commercial success. Hits on the album, absolutely awesome album, and these guys just added fuel to the fire by releasing that album. Listen, so I was in junior high when Significant Other dropped. This was 1999. I want you to think about something. This was the same year that Eminem dropped the Slim Shady LP. Hit. Same year, the Red Hot Chili Peppers dropped their album, Californication. Hit. Same year, Blink-182 dropped Enema of the State. Hit. It was even the same year the Backstreet Boys dropped their album, Millennium. Guess what? It was a hit. 1999 was a hell of a year for music, and it wasn't just those artists and those albums. There was more, but I'm just saying, put it into perspective. You know how huge those were, and you know each one of those albums had songs you heard all year long, even the following year. Limp Bizkit was no different. Something else going on very huge at this time was TRL on MTV, Total Request Live, hosted by Carson Daly. It did not hurt any of these non-pop artists or bands getting on the TRL countdown. In fact, it actually helped them quite a bit. If you were already selling albums and you were on TRL countdown and more people were hearing you, you were probably selling more albums. I'm talking about artists like Eminem and Kid Rock, bands like Korn, Linkin Park, System of a Down, Limp Bizkit. These guys were definitely helped by MTV's TRL. There's no doubt. And I got a lot to say about TRL. All right, everybody. So just a really quick rant, because this is really near and dear to my heart. And I'm sure there's many of you out there that feel the same way, especially if you're in my age range. TRL. Okay. Growing up, hindsight, looking back now, a lot of elders would say, when you get to this age, blah, blah, this, or don't do that, you're going to regret it later, blah, blah. How many pieces of advice or things that we hear that didn't really mean much to us, or we didn't understand it at the time? Obviously, as we've gotten older, we understand them now. Now we try to pass that knowledge on to those that are younger than us or our kids. But TRL is one thing I finally look back on, and if I go on YouTube and put on an old TRL episode, I get all warm and fuzzy inside, and I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's just what it is. I love looking at that old footage because it just takes me back. And Limp Bizkit was a staple at that time on TRL, along with other people. Britney Spears, Eminem, Kid Rock. Those guys were just always on there. Backstreet Boys, NSYNC. They were always there. So you associated them with TRL, and those were the times, man. For me, those were the times. So Significant Other was a huge commercial success. Awesome album. If you ask me, out of all the Limp Bizkit songs, most of them that I like were on Significant Other. But there was a few on this next album, their third studio album, Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water. Where the hell did that name come from, right? Now, obviously, Fred and Wes and the guys have come out to say the meaning of the name of the title for the album. Obviously, a chocolate starfish being a reference to the hole on the, on the back, you know what I'm talking about. And the hot dog flavored water was just something that Wes kind of came up with while he was staring at a hot dog vendor, looking at a bottle of water, and some weird story, but chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water definitely grabs your attention. Now, the band was huge, but by the time Chocolate Starfish released and they even got bigger, really when you ask people, oh, do you know who Limp Bizkit is? Most time the reaction was, oh, that's that dude Fred Durst's band, and they got that weird guitarist. That's what they had become. So yes, TRL was one thing that would take me back instantly, nostalgia. Something else would also take me back. And matter of fact, I sat down and watched the whole entire show the other day. I'm talking about the Video Music Awards, MTV Video Music Awards. That show was awesome. I'd watch it every year for like 5 years straight. That was the heyday for that show. 2000 VMAs. Fred Durst, Christina Aguilera did a collaboration, performed on stage. It got some heat for Fred. Now, Richard Patrick from Filter, he came out and said that performance, Fred had embarrassed the entire rock community by doing that. You know what Fred said? I don't care. Who cares? That's what I liked about Fred. Even though, there was a lot of controversy around certain things he did, and his style didn't always mesh with everybody, but he did what he wanted because he liked to do it. His style was his style and the band's style, and they went with it. No regrets. Him doing that with Christina, no regrets. And why would you? You got to stand by your guns. If you're going to do something, don't be ashamed of it. And he wasn't. That's what I respect about Fred so much. And hell, who gives a crap? How much money do you think he made on that performance? I'm sure it was more than Richard Patrick. So Wes Borland left Limp Bizkit in 2001. It wasn't the first time, but it wouldn't be the last time either. But it was the first time since the band had reached the height of success that they were at currently at that time. Now, the band would move on and get a new guitarist, and they would record their fourth studio album. Results may vary. For me, this was not a really good album. Now, no disrespect, because obviously those guys worked very hard on that album. Just my opinion, my taste, my flavor. I cannot get into that album. They did have the cover of The Who's Behind Blue Eyes, which was huge. But aside from that, not a huge fan of it, me personally. And you really notice the absence of Wes on the guitar. So 2005 would see Wes Borland return. He returned to the band. They got in the studio to do their fifth studio album, Unquestionable Truth Part 1. At this point, The band's heyday was in their rear view. Their days were done. You don't realize that at the time, as a fan, as the guys in the band, but really, everything else was just kind of, we're going to flatline. Not saying it was bad, not saying they were going off the grid, but it was time to just smooth sail. Because it would be 6 years before they would release another album. 2011, they dropped Gold Cobra. Then, 10 years before we got their 7th studio album, Still Sucks, which released 2 years ago in 2021. Not bad albums, but does not even come close or comparable to Significant Other or Chocolate Starfish. So, bottom line is, those are their 2 best albums, period. There's no debate on it. Maybe some Limp Bizkit hardcores will agree that that's not the case, or they might agree with us. Who knows? But I know one thing. Limp Bizkit's still around, and they're still kicking butt, but not to the extent that they were doing in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, real quick, like I said, the guys are still around, still touring, still kicking butt. You still got Fred, you still got Wes Borland on guitar, and the guys are still rocking. But you know what really gets me excited? When I see something like this.
Well, you know, let's do something crazy.
That right there is just awesome. It gives me goosebumps. It takes me back. You get those nostalgia hits every once in a while, and that's something right there. Obviously, I see Fred. He's going with the flow. Obviously, he's not in his 20s no more. He's embracing his age. He's embracing a new style, but he's still there to rock you out of your seat, period. I think it's cool how his style is now. He's just the cool dad now. But there's nothing wrong with that. And to see what I just saw right there in that clip, it just, hey, the guys are still the guys. They're still Limp Bizkit. They're still awesome. And hey, what they did for us, what they gave us in the late 90s, early 2000s will never be forgotten. So you really got to ask yourself, what is Limp Bizkit's place in rock history? Now, it's hard for me to say they're up there with the bands like Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and the Greats. They're not up there with the heavyweight champs, but they're not in the basement either. I think they're right there where not only are they great for what they did for rock music, they're great for the genre, that new metal style that came out. When it came out, it knocked you in the face, and there's not many bands that you'll say, okay, these were the bands that really got that genre on the map. You're gonna say Limp Bizkit. You're gonna say Linkin Park. You're gonna say Korn. Those are some of the bands you're gonna name right off the bat first when somebody asks you about new metal bands. Now, there's tons of other ones. It's a big, big tree out there, lots of branches, lots of bands. But in the end, Limp Bizkit has their place in rock history, and they got my respect, and I know they got yours. So again, thank you for watching this American Dream channel. Till next time, take care of yourself. I'm out.